I didn't sue my neighbor. I didn't yell, didn't threaten, didn't even raise my voice. No, I just let the city come in and quietly erase everything he built like it never existed, and the craziest part? He gave me every single reason to do it. It started on a Monday morning, nothing dramatic, just me dragging my trash bin down the side of the house, half awake, coffee still doing its thing, and then I saw it, a fence. 6 feet tall, fresh wood, clean cuts, perfectly aligned like someone had measured it 3 times before putting it in, and I just stood there for a second, blinking, trying to remember if that had always been there. Because the thing about our backyards was there was never a fence. Just a loose tree line, some uneven grass, a couple of tired shrubs that looked like they'd survived 3 different owners and given up emotionally halfway through. That was the boundary, if you could even call it that. So I figured, all right, maybe they finally decided to put something up, totally normal. People do that. And I didn't think twice about it until later that day when my lawn guy, Miguel, was packing up his equipment and kind of paused, looking toward the back. He goes, "Hey, you know your yard goes past that fence, right?" And I laughed. I actually laughed, because that sounded ridiculous. I told him, "Nah man, it's probably right around those trees. Always has been." But he didn't laugh back. He just shook his head slowly, like he'd been holding that thought in for a while, and said, "I've been cutting your grass for 3 years. I always thought your lot went further back." And that stuck with me. Not in a loud way, not like panic, just a quiet itch in the back of my brain that wouldn't go away. So that night, I pulled out my closing documents. You know, the stuff you swear you'll never need again after signing your life away at the title office, and I found the plot map. And here's the thing, I remembered it differently. In my head, my property ended right around that tree line. Neat, simple, makes sense, but on paper, it didn't. Not even close. According to that map, my lot extended about 10 feet beyond those trees, which meant that brand new, perfectly installed, smells like Home Depot fence wasn't on their land. It was on mine. Now look, I'm not the kind of guy who jumps straight into conflict, all right? Mistakes happen, surveys get messy, old markers disappear, previous owners say things that may or may not be true. So I did the normal, reasonable thing. I walked over, knocked on the door, and that's when I properly met him, Ethan. Mid-40s, relaxed posture, the kind of guy who smiles a little too easily when things are slightly off. You know the type. I kept it casual, told him I noticed the fence, mentioned I'd been looking at my property map, and it seemed like the line might be a bit further back than expected. Nothing accusatory, just informational. He smiles, of course he smiles, and goes, "Oh yeah, the previous owner told me the boundary was around there." Around there. That phrase should have bothered me more than it did at the time. I suggested we double-check together, maybe get a survey just to be safe, keep things clean between neighbors, you know, the adult approach. And he said, "Yeah, sure, no problem. Easy. Smooth. Almost too smooth." And then, nothing happened. Days turned into weeks. The fence stayed exactly where it was. No follow-up, no survey, no conversation, just silence, like the topic had quietly expired. And I almost let it go. Almost. Until the shed showed up. 2 weeks later, I come home, and there's a delivery truck parked behind his yard, panels laid out like a puzzle, workers moving fast, and within 2 days there it was. Not some cheap plastic thing from a big box store. No, this was solid. Foundation poured. Gravel base leveled. Electrical wiring run underground with a light installed inside. This wasn't temporary. This was permanent. And the worst part? Half of it, literally half, sat past that fence line. On my land. That's when the feeling changed. Because a misplaced fence? That's a conversation. But a permanent structure? That's a decision. And it wasn't mine. So I stopped guessing, and I ordered a survey. $950. Not cheap, but a whole lot cheaper than pretending nothing was happening. A week later, the surveyor came out early in the morning, quiet, methodical, placing bright orange stakes and little flags that looked almost harmless until you actually understood what they meant. I stood there staring at them longer than I expected to. Because suspicion is one thing. But proof? Proof hits different. The fence? 8 feet onto my property. The shed? 5 feet. Clear. Undeniable. No gray area, no interpretation. Just lines and facts. I took photos. Printed everything. Walked back over to Ethan's place. Calm as ever. Handed him a copy, and said, "Hey, we can fix this now. Easy, before it turns into something expensive." And for a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be the part where he goes, "Oh wow, didn't realize, let's fix it." But he didn't say that. He didn't say anything. No reply. No acknowledgement. Instead, the few days later, I noticed something new. Lawn chairs, placed right there, on the disputed strip, like it had already been decided. And then, over the weekend, a small fire pit appeared, right on top of my land. And that's when he finally said it. Casually, almost like it was common sense. People say if you use it long enough, it basically becomes yours. He even shrugged a little when he said it. Like this was just how things worked. Like time could rewrite ownership. And I remember standing there, looking at him, thinking, basically isn't how the law works. All right, let me pause the story for a second, because this right here, this exact moment, is where a lot of people get it twisted, and honestly, it's where Ethan completely misplayed his hand. From a legal perspective, what he was hinting at is something called adverse possession. Yeah, sounds fancy, like some kind of loophole you unlock if you just sit in a lawn chair long enough. But that's not how it works. Not even close. According to standard procedure, for someone to claim land that isn't theirs, they have to meet very specific conditions: continuous use, open and obvious possession, and most importantly, time. And we're not talking about a couple weekends with a fire pit. We're talking years. In many places, 5, 10, sometimes even 20 years. And during that entire time, the actual owner can't challenge it. And here's the part people miss. The second I disputed it, the clock resets. Game over. Now layer on top of that the structure issue. Because fences are one thing. They're annoying, but they can be moved. A shed with a foundation, electrical wiring, and permits? That's a different beast entirely. Once you build something permanent across a property line, you're not just dealing with neighbor drama anymore. You're stepping into zoning violations, setback rules, and city code enforcement. And trust me, cities don't care about your "basically mine" argument. They care about compliance. But here's where it gets even more interesting, psychologically. This is a psychological trap a lot of people fall into. Ethan didn't just build a shed, he escalated commitment. First the fence, then the structure, then the furniture, then the fire pit. Each step making it harder for him to back down without feeling like he lost. So instead of correcting early, when it was easy, he doubled down. And once someone starts believing their own version of reality, logic stops working on them. At that point, you're not having a disagreement anymore. You're just waiting for consequences to show up. So yeah, once he dropped that "basically ours" line, I already knew how this was going to end. Not dramatically, not with yelling or some viral neighbor showdown. Just quietly, methodically, with paperwork and patience. I didn't go back over there. Didn't argue. Didn't try to convince him again. Because at that point, there was nothing left to discuss. I called a lawyer instead. Not to sue. See, that's the part people always jump to. But just to understand the cleanest way to handle it without turning my life into a 2-year courtroom soap opera. And the advice I got was simple, almost boring, which is usually a good sign. Don't fight him, the lawyer said. Let the city do it. And once he explained it, it made perfect sense. Because this wasn't just a disagreement between neighbors anymore. This was a code issue, a zoning issue, a permit issue. And cities? Cities love enforcing their own rules, especially when everything is already documented for them. So I filed a boundary complaint with the local zoning office. Nothing dramatic. No accusations. No emotional language. Just facts, survey attached, photos included, location marked. And then I waited. About a week later, 2 inspectors showed up. White truck, clipboards, that slow, deliberate walk people have when they know they're about to ruin someone's afternoon. They didn't knock on my door first, didn't need to. They went straight to the back. I watched from my kitchen window, coffee in hand, trying not to look too invested. But let's be honest, I was very invested. They measured everything. Fence line, shed placement, distance from property boundary, distance from structures. Took photos, made notes. One of them even crouched down to check the foundation, brushing dirt aside like he was uncovering evidence at a crime scene. Ethan came out halfway through, confused at first, then slightly defensive, asking what was going on, and one of the inspectors just calmly explained they were responding to a zoning complaint. You could see it hit him in real time. That slow shift from confidence, to uncertainty. They asked about permits, and to his credit, he had them. But here's the problem. Permits don't mean build wherever you want. They mean build exactly where you said you would. And he didn't. Not even close. A few days later, the notice showed up. Official. Printed. No ambiguity. The structure was in violation of setback requirements, and it crossed a property line. Non-compliant. Remove or relocate within 30 days. That was it. No debate. No gray area. 30 days. And that's when, finally, he knocked on my door. First time since all this started. Different energy this time, too. No casual smile. No around their language. Just a softer tone. A little more careful, like someone who suddenly realized the game wasn't going the way they thought it would. Hey, I think the city's overreacting a bit, he said, kind of half laughing, testing the waters. Permits can be confusing, you know? I didn't interrupt. Just let him talk. And then he got to the real ask. He said, look, what if you just sign something? Like, give permission for it to stay? That way we don't have to go through all this. There it was. Not an apology. Not accountability. Just a request to make the problem go away. So I asked him one simple question. Are you planning to buy that portion of the land? And he paused, just for a second, but long enough to tell me everything I needed to know. No, I mean just permission. To keep things the way they are. Of course. Because in his mind, the outcome was already decided. He just needed me to agree with it. I shook my head. Calm. No attitude. Yeah, I'm not doing that. And that was the end of the conversation. No yelling. No slammed doors. Just reality setting in. Day 29 came. Nothing changed. The shed was still there. Fence still up. Chairs still sitting on my land like they had a lease agreement I never signed. Day 30 passed. Still nothing. And then day 31, that's when it got expensive. Because once you ignore a city order like that, the tone changes. Fines started hitting daily. Not symbolic ones either, real money. The kind that stacks up fast enough to make you check your mailbox twice a day. I didn't have to do anything at that point. Didn't call. Didn't follow up. Didn't push. The system was already moving. By day 45, it was over. A contractor showed up early in the morning. Different crew this time. Efficient, no small talk, just straight to work. They started with the shed. Panel by panel, piece by piece, like they were rewinding time. The walls came off first, then the roof, then the frame underneath, tools clanking, wood splitting, the whole structure slowly losing its shape until it was just parts. They cut through the foundation next, breaking it apart, hauling chunks into a trailer like it had never been meant to stay there in the first place. And then the fence. Those clean, straight posts that showed up overnight? Gone. Pulled out of the ground one by one, leaving behind holes that got filled in like someone was erasing a mistake. No drama. No confrontation. Just removal. Ethan didn't say a word to me during any of it. Didn't come over. Didn't argue. Didn't try to stop anything. Because at that point, there was nothing left to argue. You can't negotiate with a deadline that already passed. By the end of the day, it was quiet again. No shed. No fence. No chairs. No fire pit. Just open space. Grass. And a clear line that matched exactly what that survey had shown weeks earlier. I stood there for a bit, just looking at it. Not in some victory pose. Not celebrating. Just taking in how simple everything looked again. Like none of it had ever happened. But it did. And the thing is, it didn't end because I fought harder. It ended because I didn't. So, what's the actual takeaway here? Because on the surface, yeah, it looks like a simple neighbor builds on wrong land, gets shut down kind of story. Satisfying, clean, almost a little cinematic with that quiet teardown at the end. But if that's all you see, you're missing the part that actually matters. Because this wasn't really about a fence, or a shed, or even the land itself. It was about how people handle lines, physical ones, legal ones, and the invisible ones we test when we think no one's paying attention. The lesson here is most conflicts don't explode right away. They creep, slowly, quietly, one small decision at a time. First it's the boundary is probably around here. Then it's the fence is close enough. Then it's, well, we already built it. And before you know it, someone's sitting in a chair on land that doesn't belong to them, fully convinced it does, because they've repeated that story to themselves enough times that it feels true. That's not stupidity. That's human psychology. We justify. We normalize. We adapt to whatever benefits us in the moment. And the longer we go without being challenged, the more real it feels. This is a psychological trap, the escalation of commitment. Every step Ethan took made the next step harder to undo. If he had checked the boundary before building the fence, problem solved. If he had paused before pouring a foundation, still fixable. If he had responded when I handed him the survey, easy conversation. But instead, he kept going. And once you build something, literally and mentally, it becomes part of your identity. Taking it down doesn't feel like correction, it feels like loss. And people will fight surprisingly hard to avoid feeling like they lost, even when the facts are right in front of them. Now, from a legal perspective, this situation is actually way more common than people think. Property lines aren't always obvious. Old records get messy. Previous owners pass down unofficial truths that sound confident but aren't verified. And then someone builds based on assumption instead of confirmation. That's where things go sideways. Because according to standard procedure, ownership isn't about what feels right. It's about what's documented, measured, and enforceable. And here's the part a lot of people don't like hearing. If you don't protect your boundary, you risk losing control over it. Not instantly, not in a weekend, but over time, legally and practically, things can shift if left unchallenged. That doesn't mean you need to be aggressive. It means you need to be aware, calm, and willing to act when it matters. What worked in my situation wasn't confrontation, it was restraint. I didn't escalate emotionally. I escalated structurally. There's a difference. I didn't try to win the argument. I made the argument irrelevant. And that's a strategy more people should understand. Because when you rely on systems, documentation, surveys, city enforcement, you remove opinion from the equation. There's no debate with a measured line. There's no negotiation with a code violation. There's no, basically mine, when the paperwork says otherwise. And look, I get it. Some people will hear this and think, man, you could have just let it go. It's only a few feet. And yeah, maybe. But it's never just about the few feet. It's about the precedent. Because once you allow one boundary to shift, what stops the next one? And more importantly, what does that say about how you value what's yours? Respect doesn't start with other people. It starts with what you're willing to protect. Now here's the part I'm actually curious about. What would you have done? Would you have ignored it? Talked it out longer? Signed the permission and avoided the hassle? Or gone even harder, straight into legal action from day one? Because there's no single, perfect response here, just different ways of handling the same pressure. Drop your take in the comments. I read all of them, seriously, and I want to know where you land on this. And if you've ever dealt with something like this, neighbor disputes, property lines, HOA drama. Yeah, I know some of you have stories that are way crazier than mine. Share them. Because the more people understand how these situations actually play out, not just emotionally, but legally and psychologically, the better decisions they'll make when it happens to them. And trust me, it happens more than you think.